Good evening everybody, welcome to the studio this evening. And yes, we are live. And tonight doing some pyrography, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on working on this. This was a practice piece from several months ago. Well, I'm going to finish it, so you can see it's half finished, so I'm going to carry on and actually finish it. Which may or may not be this stream. In fact, it's very likely not to be this stream because it does take a little bit longer than might at first appear. So, to borrow a line from Ghostbusters, heat 'em up. I'll switch the pyro on. And let's get a wire. Hopefully, you'll be able to see quite well. I've positioned the camera right up against, so it's looking more or less, well, sort of at the same angle I am. Right. So, I need to hint that this is a window. So I'm going to change my glasses, and then I'm going to put a shadow around that window. I always forget something, in this particular case my glasses, which is usually what I forget. I don't exactly forget that I'm wearing them, I forget that I need these other pair to see the detail really closely. One of these days maybe what I'll have to do is get one of the magnifying headsets. Right, so what I'm going to do is I am going to outline under the window frame. Now I've got this tool turned down quite a bit, and yet it's still hot. This tool, it being just a wire, and quite a small wire, it does heat up really quickly. Now in this particular case the window frame is white, so I don't really want it to, I don't want to colour it, so I have to sort of just outline around it. Yes, I need to do that as well across the top there. We'll come back to that in a moment. Yeah, just on the edge. So, shadow lines. This is a dark shadow line. Going to come down to there. Okay, I do have a reference picture for this, and that's on another screen, so when you see me looking off to the right, that's what I'm doing, just checking my reference picture. So yeah, forgot that, didn't I? Oh well, never mind. Turn this down a bit more. Going on the tip just cools the tip down. Means that when I touch it down it doesn't suddenly get a burst of heat applied onto the wood. Now then, what I should have done is leave a little gap up here. I didn't. That was a mistake. But that's why it's a practice piece. So that I can practice. If I make a mistake, that's alright. Because then it's something I learn for next time. Now the heat on this tool is turned down almost as far as the machine will let me turn it down, and yet it still heats up incredibly quickly. It's turning the wood dark brown really quickly. So I do have to work relatively quickly with this, and bear in mind that it is hot when I touch it down onto the wood. And yeah, shadow line around the bottom of that glass, and again I made a slight mistake with that. Oh no, I can do it that way. Yeah, same slight mistake as I did on the other end. That is, I should have left a gap. You can get some really thin lines with this as well. Actually, I'll cheat. I'll do that. Yeah, and see if I ought to outline that. I'm wondering if I'll bother. I don't know. Yes, probably should. Can I turn this down any more? Just a little touch. There, around the window. Okay, and what I should also need to do, whilst I've got this tool on the end here, I'm going to apply a little bit of a shadow underneath these rails. These are the handrails up to there's a door between them. So these are the handrails that the driver or whoever's in the cab used to get in. matching it up with a shadow down here that I created as well. There we go. Now then, have I got an eraser? I've got one on the back end of this pencil. Let's see if this will work. Should get me electric one out. But I think I already accidentally went over that pencil line there with the pyrography tool earlier. And when you do that, you kind of bake the pencil lines in, and then they won't erase because there's like a glaze over the top. So you always want to erase the lines before you apply pyrography over the top of them, unless you're doing really dark lines, and then it obviously doesn't matter. So I can't get rid of those now, but never mind. Fluffy Twiggler, indeed, a train. You've seen this one before though. This is the one that I started doing pyrography wise, so it's I decided it was time to finish it. That should have been a bit wider. Never mind. I don't think I'll get this one in down here though, just because it's possibly too dark to actually see it. These are the handles. The door locks basically. A little bit too dark to see the handle. Never mind. Okay, so we've got the steps in, we've got that set of steps in, we've got the front of the cab, well, that's the buffer area. Yeah, needs a little bit of shading underneath there, that's shading on that. That's sort of shaded in, okay, yes. Could do with some numbers on there, but they will come a little bit later. A little bit, yeah. I suppose I should put those in. Okay. Let's give it some windscreen wipers. So how was Doctor Who tonight, Fluffy Twiglet? I haven't seen it yet, but we shall see. Captain Dobie, good evening, welcome. That comes lower down, okay. Yeah, that will do the job. And then we go from there roughly up to about there, which is where the thing is connected to. Yeah. Not a fine but black line. See, if I turn the heat up a little bit, that will help. Okay, I'm barely touching the wood because I want this to be a very fine line if I can get it that way. And then basically, is that just a shadow? Yes, I think it is. And then I more or less do exactly the same thing at the other side. But most of the other side is actually hidden. So I kind of just need to put a line from where this is what turns the wiper, so but the wiper's hidden against the side of the window. And again a shadow just coming down that way. And just like that will do. So now we just put two wipers in, or sort of two wipers in, a little bit of shadow because it's not a completely dull day, sort of overcast, so there's a little bit of shadowing. can see down here at the bottom here where I forgot to erase, or rather I learnt that you have to erase. I'm not going to get that to go off, I don't think, to disappear, I don't think. Now this is a handrail. There is a shadow underneath the handrail. Just going to make it a little bit more prominent. Don't know if I'm actually going to make the handrail stand out any more than it is, more than just hinting at some sort of line across here. And it will actually curve down. And the shadow sort of disappears, which is fine. That's a heavier shadow there. I probably want to recolour this area a little bit darker so that because it's undercut slightly. But again, that's something to deal with later. I'm sort of trying to decide how to deal with the details down the side here, because it's really dark. And most of the details are actually visible because they're not as dark. So I probably want to switch pens for a start. What have I got on this end here? That's spoon shader. That one looks okay. For this, let's turn up the heat. And here I am forgetting once again to erase that pencil line. Maybe a bit late, I think I've already been over it, so it's going to be about there. This is going to be about there. Okay, I'm trying to line up the two buffers. There won't be a lot of difference in size. Normally something that's closer to you would appear larger, but this isn't that close. Speaking relatively, that is. I'll have to fill this in. These are black, and they've got grease on, which obviously, well, not obviously, but does get really dirty. So the whole buffer area is black. Now I'm not going to make it black. Black with pyrography isn't really very good. Isn't very good look. It's an odd sort of texture. So essentially, just going to make it as dark as I can. Well, as dark as I feel reasonable. And probably about that looks okay. Variable in colour also doesn't matter, as I say, it's covered in grease and there's light shining on it, and so it doesn't actually matter that it's a smooth, consistent colour or shade. Did notice looking at the references, and I've seen it on quite a few as well, other pictures as well. It does seem to be a circular pattern, which sort of makes sense because the buffers aren't actually flat, they're downed in almost all cases that I've seen. So the centre is a contact area which then becomes devoid of grease. I can do something like that, sort of just roughly in the centre is slightly lighter. Now the difficulty on this wood is I can't really pick out highlights as I might do on a different wood by scraping slightly, because that completely disrupts the surface texture of this wood. So some of the highlight stuff, which would be like glints off of metal, I can't do very easily. That's going to go about as far as the end of that light, which is about there. So it probably means it wants to stick out a bit more. Yes, it does. Bottom is a little bit at the wrong angle, so we'll just adjust that slightly. It also needs to be a little bit more sort of rounded shape. As does the top. They're sort of an ovalish sort of shape, so they're not square. Okay, they may get darker a bit later on. C6103, hi, good evening and welcome. In fact, this one here looks, for some reason that one there looks lighter. It's just the lighting. Right. Just going to come back and then basically disappear into the background. By turning the tool over, I can use just the very tip. I'm literally just wanting it to go behind the buffer there, because this is the piston that the buffer end sticks out on. And now I want to indicate a sort of highlighted surface, so what I'm going to do is draw the other side, the top of the buffer, or the top of the piston. And then leave a gap doesn't look quite right. That wants to be a lot smaller than that, so we'll come up a little bit to about there. Just like with scraper board, you're having to think in reverse. So you don't put highlights in, you omit putting them in. Essentially, most of the rest of this detail around here just becomes black. Yeah, I don't really want to put any more detailing on that anyway, so the next thing here is really just to fill in all this area, but fill it in so it's not quite as dark as the buffers, but almost. And I may have to make those darker just so that they don't because this area is supposed to be black. I suppose actually I can make this dark and leave them slightly lighter than that. It will tend to have the same effect. You guys are quiet tonight. Are you so awestruck that by this this item of pyrography that you've gone completely speechless? Now this is an opportunity to practice keeping a consistent tone across a large area. And the reference pictures, those pistons actually go into like square, like a square box around, which for some reason the 4 nuts that are on that are silvered instead of being black, so they stand out, but I'm not going to put those in. So I want this front air dam here to be quite a bit darker, but I'm just practicing keeping a consistent colour, but a lighter colour. That way I get the opportunity to practice it more than once, because once I've made this consistent colour all the way across this light, I'm going to make it darker. This is essentially all about pen control and speed of pen, because that's what's controlling the controlling the colour here, is how quickly I'm moving the pen. I'm not changing the temperature on the pen at all, so the temperature is whatever the temperature is. So the way to get it darker is to either hold the pen in one place for longer, or to turn up the heat. So I'm not turning up the heat, so keeping the pen in one place for longer is the way to make it darker. It is, however, quite difficult to create a constant shade across quite a large area, hence the practice. I am actually quite pleased by the fact that certainly here I am maintaining a reasonably constant tone, although it's gone darker, getting lighter. But it is a relatively smooth transition, which is pleasing to me. It will be getting darker yet. Right, and now for a change I'm going right to left because, well, for two reasons. One is I want to come up against the right hand edge of this front panel and create a straight line, which is easier to do going right to left. But the second is it's a lot more convenient to go right to left in some places than it is to go left to right. But if all you ever practice is moving in one direction, then when you come to need to do it the other way, you basically can't do it. You end up doing things like turning the board over or working at really awkward angles just because you haven't practiced it, and you don't actually have pen control when you're moving in a different direction. Not bad. So right to left in that particular case. Of course, for most people, left to right is the natural way to move. If you're right-handed anyway, that is. Quite pleased with that tone. I'm a little bit off at the top, but otherwise I'm not. I'm quite pleased I've got a fairly consistent tone all the way across there. Interesting, I just realised I've got some dark, that's black. So what that's given me is it's given me some, given me a colour reference. So this needs to be somewhat in that area of colour. Perhaps slightly darker than that because this side is lit more than the front, so it would be darker as well. But we'll see when we get there. Now I'm going to fill in this area here. Okay. Yeah, now I make it darker. By moving the pen slower, I'm applying more heat, and that more heat makes it go dark. Now if you're seeing odd bits of whiffs of smoke, which you may well be, that's more surface wood dust than it is the wood itself. Now I keep wanting to move quite fast to do this, and of course you can't. I could turn the heat up, and I may well do that shortly, but my natural inclination is to want to do this quite quickly, moving the tool quickly, and then if I do that, it just won't heat the wood enough. If I want to work more quickly, I can, as I mentioned, turn the heat up, then I have to work more quickly. And you get less time to develop the shade with the greater heat. I can hold this relatively long periods of time in one place. I'm not keeping it still because it will burn or make a tool mark that I don't want, but I am moving it slowly, but I'm moving it slow enough that the tool is in one place for a relatively long time, thus turning the wood dark fairly quickly. But if I turn the heat up, I'd have to move the tool quicker to achieve the same effect. Part of that is the wood itself, Captain Derby. As you can see up here, the wood is shining. It's hardboard is, generally speaking, is really shiny wood, and that's because it's essentially pressed between hot rollers, and the heat causes the wood to be really smooth. By hot, I mean sort of like steam type heat, 100 degrees, something like that. And it makes a really smooth texture, which is what makes it shiny. Applying the pyrography to the top keeps that shine, and also, as I've mentioned before, the pyrography is kind of like a glaze. So the glaze on top of shiny makes it shiny. But it's not glossy because the wood itself just isn't glossy. So that's the satin bit to it. It sort of comes free of charge. Yeah, it is slightly more glossy. I'm ironing the wood as well, so I am flattening out the fibres. So it's sort of you're not wrong. It's and if I pick another piece where which is on a different wood, like Junior or Felix. Put you back here somewhere. I'll just pick this, the monorail. This wood, as you can see, is a lot less shiny, but when pyrography is applied, you can see there on the window how it's reflective, because I've smoothed the wood fibres out like ironing them, and also the glazing effect. So a bit of both in the case of hardwood. As you get darker, it becomes a little bit harder to keep a consistent tone, because not all areas of the wood take the colour exactly the same rate. Thank you both, Captain Toby and C6103. And you sometimes and also the surface texture changes slightly. So you sometimes get little gaps which you then got to sort of get in and colour up without sort of making the areas around it darker still and making it still stand out. So it does become consistent tone is or can be very challenging to do. See here, we're just above where I am now. There's like a little channel which is slightly lighter than the areas around it for no apparent reason. I mean, it is down to the wood, so what I've got to do is try and get in there and darken just that centre bit without making the other areas around it darker still. Because because if I make them darker I end up just chasing my tail, if you like, making the centre darker, which makes the outer darker still, and I keep going around in a vicious circle. So sometimes you have to know when to sort of say, oh, well, too bad, and not give up and not try chasing your tail. Is it difficult to create gradients? Athlonic Gaming. Yes and no. Getting smooth gradients it takes practice. Is it difficult to get different shades? Not fantastically. It's down to the amount of heat. So the longer you hold the tool, or the tool is in a particular place for any given setting of temperature, then the darker it will become, which is why this area here is light. I went over it fairly quickly, and now as I'm going over it a lot slower, it's going darker. And if I want to graduate it, I can do this in layers, so I can make it a little bit darker, as I'm doing here, just applying a little bit extra heat, moving reasonably quickly. So I am it might be a little bit difficult for you to see with the cameras, but this small area at the bottom here is now a shade darker than around it. Actually, you can see it, just a shade, and then I can just keep applying more passes. And just basically just like that, and just keep smoothing it out. And so I can get something like about 16. Well, no, on this board probably about 8 and 9 different shades. On a whiter board you can get up to about 16. No, you're not using strength at all with this. It's delicate control, especially if you want to do fine lines. But it is stroking. I'm not applying pressure at all. I don't want to apply pressure. If you apply pressure, you tend to get tooling marks where you actually squash the wood, and it shows up. Sometimes you want to do that and actually get a texture. So here, for example, you're seeing I've actually created vertical almost cuts in the wood by applying pressure, but with the tip of the tool, and it works quite well for fur as well. Same down here, there's sort of a texture, but generally speaking, depends on what you want to do, the effect that you're after. I prefer it to be smooth without texture, so I'm trying to create all my differences using smooth colour transitions rather than actually sort of texture in the wood most of the time. Sometimes when you're doing this as well, especially on reasonably high heats, you never actually even touch the wood. You just get near it. And that is enough. If the temperature is higher on the tool, that's enough to turn the wood brown. Of course, it's actually a lot easier to control if you do touch the wood, but I'm probably at the stage here now. It's been a few weeks since I last did any pyrography, so it takes a little bit of getting used to the pen control again. I'm probably getting to a stage now where I could do with turning the heat up a little bit. If you have the heat turned down low, it takes longer for the colour to to arrive, but the fact that it takes longer gives you more opportunity to stop. So I can go like, oh, that's the colour I want, and stop at that point. If I turn the heat right up, it'll do that in about half a second, so I don't have a lot of leeway. So it's I generally prefer working with a relatively cool tool, so that I have that control. I can just say, yep, that's just the exact shade I want, and have time to stop. But equally well, as you get used to using it, your control improves anyway, and so you can work faster. Sometimes actually having the tool too cool can be counterproductive, because it then leads to a tendency to hold it still, and if you hold it still, that's when you get burn marks that you didn't actually want. With this sort of pyrography anyway, obviously if you're using a stamp style of pyrography or a black and white pyrography, then yeah, you might leave the tool in one place for quite a long time. I think actually we will turn the heat up just a little bit on here, half a unit. Give myself a chance to get used to the increased heat before turning up any more. mentioned earlier, darker tone control is harder to achieve. I'm getting some blotching here. Well, I'm really not after it. I'm not, you know, it being a practice piece, you know, that's the point of practice, but also this is intended to be black, really dark, and there could be all sorts of things, you know, this oil, grease and things, so there will be slight variations in lighting and things. So I'm not after a perfect, well, I am after a perfect tone, but if I don't get it, it's not particularly a problem to me. Yeah, the slight differences in tone, slight blotchiness is consistent with the reference. Turn it a different way to the light, because the light reflecting off it does have make it show up differently on the camera, and also to me. That looks reasonably good, so I shall carry on. Well, if it looked bad I'd be carrying on, but I am pleased with it so far. Now, one other thing about this kind of pyrography tool is that the longer you hold the nib on, well, within certain constraints, the longer you hold the nib on the wood, the cooler it becomes. It can't actually heat up fast enough to stay at a constant temperature, and if it could, it would actually be glowing, so you kind of don't want it to. But it becomes a problem is that if I'm dragging this across here, it gradually gets lighter and lighter and lighter as the tip cools off. It does reach a steady state, but it means that you have to take that into account when you're going over it. You've got to keep going over the same spot a few times. So I'm getting a bit lighter as I come across here, so that's something to bear in mind. I need to just darken off a little bit. Work with this a little bit higher now in terms of temperature. Not quite as consistent there as I would like, but not doing too bad. takes quite a lot of concentration to do this. This is a bit like working with what they call a wet edge in paint, and that is, whilst I'm going down like this, the colour is being applied at the tip of this particular pen, but the fact that there's heat getting into the wood from the toe of this tool means that the tip colours the wood a lot quicker. And of course, working downwards, I'm applying the heat before the tip gets to it. That's the wet edge effect, and it colours a heck of a lot quicker. But it, again, it requires practice and a bit more control, so that you don't overheat the wood. Ulwin, thank you very much for that. That's very kind of you. Anybody has any particular questions about pyrography or any of the other art forms that I do, feel free to ask them in chat. You don't need to wait until that craft is being done or anything. Now, a lot of these shaped tools. This is one of them, and a couple of other shaders that I've got. They some bits of the tool are hotter than the other because the resistance is higher or lower in a particular place. And in this with this particular tool, the right hand edge is hotter than the left. And it's something you need to bear in mind of, like I have here, just switching from left to right movements to a right to left movement. Naturally, the right hand edge of the tool takes a lead in this, because you tend to tilt the tool slightly. and that does mean it sort of goes brown quicker, which is something you have to be aware of, because that might not be what you intended. And that's a shadow for a shelf. In a minute I'm just going to make that a little bit darker. Actually, it's a shadow for a step plate to be more exact. Looks like a shelf. This is one of those occasions where I am just holding the tool in one place, so that it does cause the wood to go quite dark. Just Just have to be a little bit careful not to dig the tool in too much. And this is, I'll turn this upside down so that I can get a clean edge just around that. That isn't bad. That isn't bad at all. A nice bit of practice. A little area here where we'll need to just darken off a little bit. It's not quite smooth there, but otherwise not bad. I'm quite pleased with that toning across there. So it's 10 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. I'm afraid that's the time I normally finish this at stream. So we'll call it an evening for today. We're back tomorrow. For those of you that are watching and haven't checked out the jewellery shop, there's the URL there. And in fact, let me give you a clickable one. That's if Moobot's around tonight. There we go. Same link there. So in chat, if you're interested, please take a look. I think there's some really nice items. You've seen some of them appearing in the screen here. There's some pyrography and other things. The pictures here are all stuff that have been done on stream, so they're just examples of the work. But the jewellery that you're seeing there does appear in the shop, so check it out. Some lovely gifts, so I think they are. If you're interested, order early for Christmas. Apart from that, if you're not following me, then I would be pleased if you would do so, but that's up to you. If, on the other hand, you'd just like a notification, there is Twitter. It's @ZaraGanart. A tweet goes out when I go live. Otherwise, I will be back tomorrow evening at about 8 PM UK time, 1900 hours UTC. Don't think the clock's changed tonight, so that's probably right. Or about 2 hours ago, it was 8 o'clock here, so that time tomorrow. Captain Derby, thank you very much. It does indeed fly really quickly. You know the old saying, don't you? Time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana. Thanks everybody, and I hope I'll see you in the studio again tomorrow. Have a good evening, and good night. Bye bye.